Diane Keaton. You won't believe how a single glance on a film set quietly shaped two lives and then echoed across decades. What started as an awkward audition and a cigarette-lit silence turned into a connection that neither fame nor time could fully erase. This is the story of two actors whose performances lived larger than their private words, Diane Keaton and Al Pacino. From the first moment they met, there was something unspoken between them. Picture a noisy audition room in early 1970 seconds. New York cameras, scripts, nervous actors, and then two strangers called to read a love scene. She was bright, a little nervous but alive with laughter. He was quiet, watching from behind a cloud of smoke. That hush, that look, became the rare spark that made everyone on set sit up and take notice. A director saw it and trusted it. The rest of the world would soon follow. When the film hit theaters, everything changed. They became faces, people recognized in the street, names printed in reviews, legends in the making. He embodied a cool, inward intensity. She brought warmth and wit that softened the darkest scenes. On screen, they transformed each other. Off-screen, their rhythm was different, but no less real. They weren't a tabloid romance. They were two artists who found a strange, private companionship amid roaring fame. For years, they kept their private life private. There were dinners and late-night conversations, moments when one would appear at the other's rehearsal, small acts that proved care without spectacle. But living in the spotlight puts demand on intimacy. One of them wanted a promise. The other hesitated. You can guess the rest. Quiet misunderstandings, the slow pull of diverging lives, and the painful choices that follow when two people are moving to different beats. Over time, their careers took separate paths. She leaned into roles that let her be funny, vulnerable, and defiant all at once. Characters who felt honest rather than polished. He dove into intense, raw parts that showcased his range and magnetism. Still, they kept circling back to each other. Work reunions, industry evenings, a few public appearances together, always with a layer of respect and a trace of the old intimacy. It wasn't always romance in the headline sense, more like two lives that refused to be erased from each other's histories. Years later, when the world began to notice different chapters, memoirs, awards, lifetime tributes, the small, tender lines they had exchanged decades earlier took on a new heaviness. When he wrote about her in a book, it read less like gossip and more like confession. Gratitude for someone who steadied him when he felt he might fall apart. For her, memories of him were woven into stories about careers, choices, and the way love does not always arrive at the right time. Their final professional reunion was the kind of moment directors dream about. Two actors who had once shared a private rhythm returning to the same stage to say goodbye to their characters. On set, the energy was complicated. Professional respect, mixed with the unspoken notes of a long history. The director watched as their exchange on camera did the heavy lifting. Neither had to invent emotion, because their past gave it to them. That gaze, that silence, felt like both an ending and a gentle acknowledgement that some bonds don't require neat resolutions. Outside the cameras, life kept moving. She chose motherhood and the quieter parts of life, a deliberate step toward a different kind of fulfillment. He pursued the art that made him restless and brilliant, a career full of highs and lonely corners. Neither found the traditional, settled life people often expect, but both left huge imprints on each other, on the films they made, and on audiences who felt seen by their work. When the world learned she had passed away at the age of 79, the reaction was immediate and poignant. Black and white stills circulated across feeds, clips replayed of moments where her presence changed everything. He, older, more fragile in public view, had already spoken of her once or twice in quiet interviews, always with that same simple line, "She changed the way I see love." Those words, now echoed in tributes and remembered interviews, felt less like reporting and more like mourning. What follows grief is memory, and memory is messy. Friends and colleagues shared stories, her fearless approach to aging, her wry humor, the way she made a role feel like a living person rather than a performance. He, for his part, became the keeper of certain private remembrances. How she helped him pick himself up after a career collapse. How their late-night conversations had once felt like therapy and promise. When his memoir resurfaced, passages about her suddenly read like a letter written to the past, tender and true. Here's the thing. This isn't a soap opera love story with neat beginnings and tidy endings. It's a human story about two people who collided at the right moment for their art and the wrong moment for their personal lives. It's about the choices we make when careers and emotions pull us in different directions, and how some relationships are defined not by the vows they don't have, but by the quiet, lasting work they do in shaping who we become. So, what should you take away from their story? Maybe this. Love doesn't always look like a rom-com. Sometimes it's a partnership of influence, a steady hand when the other is falling, the courage to say what you need, even when the answer isn't what you hoped. And sometimes, the most honest confessions come too late to change the past, but they still change how the past is remembered. And maybe that's why their story still resonates. Because in the end, it wasn't about fame or red carpets. It was about two souls who recognized each other in a crowded world, even if they couldn't stay side by side. Their connection became a quiet lesson that love doesn't need a perfect ending to be real. It just needs to be remembered. So, if you ever rewatch The Godfather or Annie Hall, take a moment during those silences. Somewhere in that stillness, between Michael's eyes and Kay's trembling smile, a lifetime of unspoken words still lingers, proof that some stories never really fade. They just keep breathing through the art they leave behind. If this moved you, think about how artists and personal lives intersect in your own favorite films. Which performances feel like they carry a lifetime of unsaid things? Drop a comment. I'd love to know which scene made you hold your breath. If you're here for more stories that dig up the tender, complicated parts of cinema, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching, and for remembering that sometimes silence speaks louder than words.